Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining our first ever hybrid webinar. So we have people connected remotely and we have some folks here in the room, and we're excited to get started. We're going to hold this to a solid 45 minutes. And so I want to go ahead and get going here. So thanks for joining us. So what we wanted to do was talk a little bit about the upcoming sort of technologies that we want people to be familiar with for 2021. Some of these technologies are things you might have heard us talk about or might have heard other people talk about. We just want to make sure that we are covering all of the important topics. Lucy, who's here with us in the room, she's going to be watching the chat. So if you have any questions or things you'd like to know, go ahead and have Lucy ask those in the chat, and I'll get those questions. We'll have a little Q&A at the end. But let me go ahead and get started here. So like I said, thanks for joining us. So one of the things we wanted to talk about today was the cloud, what this can mean. It kind of means something different to a lot of different people. And some of the questions that Hank and myself and other team members here at Straight Edge hear about the cloud is we kind of hear confusion, to be honest. And so what we want to try to do is get some clarity for you guys about what the cloud actually is. So in our minds, we separate the cloud and we think about a couple specific things around the cloud and the different ways that people can use the cloud. So let's start off with this. This is kind of an IT person pet peeve, but the cloud is kind of a marketing term. And so you're going to hear a lot of vendors and a lot of software companies out there talk about the cloud. We want to make sure that it's clear what the cloud actually is. So there's a couple different things that people can refer to as the cloud. The most common that you're going to see out there is something called software as a service, or SaaS. So these are things like Facebook or like different web portals that you might use. There's different EMR platforms. One's Care Cloud, that's a web-based EMR software, electronic medical records software that you would use that's in the cloud. So you got to think about these SaaS products as a cloud application that runs inside of a web browser. That's the big thing to remember. It runs in a web browser, so Chrome or Edge or Firefox, and the entire application is inside of that web browser. At Straight Edge, we use a timekeeping software that's completely in the cloud. It's a SaaS-based product. It runs inside of a web browser. We have HR software completely inside of a web browser. Our ticketing system, completely inside of a web browser SaaS product. So that's what you got to think about when you think about SaaS products that run in the cloud. Second kind of cloud is public cloud, and that's where you're going to have an application of some kind where you're not actually responsible for storing the data, but the data lives somewhere else in the cloud. Think of things like OneDrive and Dropbox and Office 365, right? Like you might access your email using Outlook, but your actual email is being stored in Microsoft's cloud. So that's something of a public cloud that uses an application to access the data, but stores the data somewhere else in the cloud. The third option there is public cloud, and this is kind of an entity unto its own, but the Office 365 platform is a cloud platform that doesn't really fit in either one of those buckets perfectly. So you have things inside of Office 365 that might be OneDrive, where you're storing documents and data in the cloud. It could be SharePoint, which is a web browser. It could be Outlook, accessing your email in the cloud. A lot of different things around the Microsoft public cloud. Microsoft has invested heavily inside of their public cloud offering. They have data centers all across the country and across the world, and they use those data centers to provide a really reliable and robust network for their products and services. The last part of public cloud, and this is where you might hear folks talk about Microsoft Azure or Amazon AWS, or Google has their own public cloud. This is the idea of taking servers that used to be in your office and moving them in their entirety into some offsite third-party public cloud offering. So you can take whatever server you have sitting in your closet right now and you can move it to Microsoft's cloud. They call that Azure. And in the tech world, we refer to that as IaaS. IaaS stands for Infrastructure as a Service. So think about taking whatever you had in your closet and moving it to Microsoft's data centers that are around the world. There's pros and cons to using their platform. Like I said, they've spent billions of dollars to make a robust and reliable platform. And some businesses might see that as a really important part of protecting their data and having it highly available to move it to something like Microsoft Azure, or like I said, Amazon AWS. The fourth option there, or fifth option there, is something called private cloud. So what private cloud is these aren't the big players. They're not the big three players, Microsoft, Amazon, Google. These are smaller companies that offer private cloud. One that you guys might know in Texas is called Rackspace. So Rackspace has a private cloud offering. Same idea. You can take the servers that you have here in your office and move them somewhere else. Straight Edge, we have a private cloud offering. It exists at a data center that's in Austin, Data Foundry. So you can choose to take your data from your closet and move it somewhere else, or take your servers from your closet, move it somewhere else on site. That could be a private cloud. You know, back when, 5 years, 6 years ago, we used to just call that hosting, or in a data center hosting. We didn't call it the cloud then. Like I said at the beginning, the cloud's kind of a marketing word that people are working through. So those are some things about the cloud that you guys want to know and find interesting. You know, our team likes to sit down and talk with our customers about what options are out there for them in the cloud. And when they are trying to sort that out, you know, we want to look at the piece of technology, the server, the workstation, the workload, the database, whatever it is that they're using. We want to take that technology and figure out the best way for it to make its way to an offsite location like the cloud. So we have a real, you know, lot of options when it comes to the cloud, but we wanted to try to define it as best as we could so that you kind of know what you're up against when you say, I want to move my data, or I want to move my information to the cloud. The next thing here, this is kind of where we want to spend quite a bit of time today, because it's something that we're seeing happening all the time to our customers and to prospects. We get a lot of phone calls even every week about issues that people have around cybersecurity. So first things first, everybody knows that this last year has been unique and different, but what the bad guys know about this last year is lots of people in their homes, working from home, kind of disconnected from the rest of their office, but still trying to work from home. So there have been an unbelievable amount of phishing emails that have come out in the last year to try to trick end users into clicking on things that they shouldn't. Some of the experts in our industry say that it's up 600-700% over last year. So, and we can attest to that. We see the tickets from our clients letting us know, hey, this email looks sketchy or fishy. We all look at it, and we see this happening over and over again. Every week, people are getting phished. I have some phishing examples here in a second that I want to show you, some of the new ways that people are trying to phish. But over 90% of the ransomware attacks that have happened in the last 2 years, 3 years, are coming in through email. That's what we mean when we say that's the attack vector. It means that that was the thing that they targeted. So once upon a time, we used to sit down with customers and say, hey, you got to have a really good firewall in place, because that's how we keep the bad guys out. And that's still true. However, the way that they're getting in is through email. They're sending a phishing email, something that's confusing or something that might trick you into doing something you wouldn't ordinarily do. And they're sending that email to you to try to trick you into doing something bad, right? And letting them on your system, or getting you to do something that you wouldn't ordinarily do. Like I said, almost 90%. So your staff needs to know the risk. So when we talk about education, honestly, we can't train everybody out there to be an IT person to sort of identify an email threat. But what we can do is we can tell stories. So we can talk to our staff about the kinds of ways that the bad guys try to phish. I'm going to give you 3 quick examples here of ways that people try to phish. So a lot of businesses in their accounting department have to do ACH or wire transfer. A lot of times when you do wire transfer, you know, you can do that straight through your bank's website. Now, banks are getting better. However, we have heard too many stories of the bank basically doing whatever their customer asked them to do, which is, hey, I want you to wire this money to this location. And you have to think about a wire transfer as, I mean, it's a briefcase full of cash. Like once it's left, it's gone. You don't have a lot of protection in a wire transfer situation, but you still have to use them every day. So when you are doing a wire transfer, go out of your way to validate the correct bank accounts and information that you're going to use for that wire transfer. Because what the bad guys are doing is they're getting in the middle of that transaction. So I can think of 4 people that I talked to last year where the bad guys got in the middle of that transaction. And what they did was they were able to get into someone's email. And we'll talk about how they got into their email a little later, but they got into somebody's email at a company. They sat there and just watched and waited for some information. In this case, it was an architecture firm. Sat there, watched and waited for the bad guys to initiate a transfer of information. And when that transfer of information came about, they jumped in the middle and requested the other party to change the bank account that they were going to ACH the money to or wire transfer the money to. They were patient. And that's not typical. Like what we used to deal with in the cybersecurity world was, I got access to a machine, I'm going to encrypt everything on the machine, I'm going to ask for a ransom. These types of attacks, the bad guys are way more patient than they used to be. They'll sit back, watch and wait for the title company, let's say, that's about to arrange a wire transfer with somebody. So they'll sit back, watch and wait, and get them to change those bank account numbers, and then you've wired that money and you're toast. I have a great banker friend here in Corpus, and he's received some of these upset customer phone calls. Why didn't y'all do something? And a lot of times they don't have the protections in place on the banking side to prevent the change of that ACH information and validating it. A lot of times these attacks, this could be thwarted by a simple phone call between the two parties. Don't just rely on the email that might go back and forth with bank account numbers in it. Go ahead and have the phone call and validate that, okay, I understand you wanted to change this bank account number. Now, before I go to my bank website and I change the bank account number, let's just all make sure we're on the same page, especially if you're dealing with like large amounts of money. You don't want it to go sour sideways on you. So wire transfers. So that's one way. The second way, and if I've probably shared this, if I've shared it once, I've shared it 100 times, but this is where the bad guys are going to try to convince somebody in your organization to go buy gift cards of any type and flavor. We've seen this with iTunes gift cards. We've seen this with Amazon e-gift cards and things like that. So it's actually happened to us at our company, and we get to talk about it because people know about it and they're on the lookout. But somebody spoofed me. They sent somebody at my company an email, and it looked like it came from Douglas Miller. And it said, hey, I'm in a big hurry and I need you to go to Target and buy $500 worth of iTunes gift cards today. Like, stop what you're doing and go do that. And the person that received this email came to me and said, hey, do you really want me to go to Target right now and get gift cards? And I said, no, I don't. Thanks for coming to talk to me about it. That was the right thing to do. I said, but let's play this out a little bit. So we responded to the email. Sounds good. Give me about an hour. And so we fired the email back off to the bad guy, let him sit there for a little bit for an hour. About an hour later, great, got the gift cards. Now what do you want me to do with them? And then you get the hook inside of the trick that they're trying to play on you. They're going to then ask you, well, take pictures of the gift cards and scratch off the PIN numbers at the back so that we can use these. I'm not in the office and I just want to get them remotely or something like that, some version of that. So share that story with your staff so that they know. So the rule around here at Straight Edge is Doug is never going to ask you to go buy gift cards. Like we just will never do it that way. It will be on a Post-it note. It will never be in an email, right? Like we're never going to use that because that's a good scam. But know the sort of pattern of that scam, because that's the same kind of idea that they're going to use over and over and over again. I need you to do this. I need you to do this quick. They're playing on the fact that like somebody in the organization that's higher up is preying on somebody lower in the organization to try to get them to do something quick without thinking. So there's always like a speed element associated with it. And if you're like me, I'm pretty easy to find on LinkedIn. So it's easy to just go on LinkedIn, go, oh, Doug Miller's the owner of this company. Oh, these 3 people work for this company. Let me go try to prey on them because we can make the connections on LinkedIn. The exact same way that you try to find out information about the people you might want to work with on LinkedIn, the bad guys are doing the same thing on LinkedIn. It's not a knock against LinkedIn, but it's just they're using the same tactics that we do to try to learn about a company that we might want to work with. So wire transfer, gift card. The third thing is unexpected attachments. Hopefully you guys have seen these, but a lot of times these pose as like FedEx or American Express or something like that, where it's like, hey, here's this attachment to check out this invoice or look at this something. Applications like Acrobat, like PDFs and Excel documents and Word documents, those documents can all have additional code written into the document that can potentially be malicious, which if I'm sending an email to one of you, and you know that I'm a legitimate sender and you might have been expecting that attachment from me, you have very little to worry about. But if you receive a random attachment from a random vendor at some random time that says, check out this document, something vague, a lot of times the bad guys are putting sort of malicious code inside of a document and sending it to you. So once again, be wary of documents. So if we could, the IT guys, we would block every attachment that might come into your email. We would block every link that might come into your email. We would get you back to the Stone Ages, text-based emails, and that's it, because those would be the most safe. Now, we know we can't do that. So tell these stories to your staff and educate them. The third point here is know what your company's rules are. So like I said a second ago, I said it jokingly, but it's absolutely serious. I'm never going to ask anybody at our company to go buy gift cards for me on a whim. Okay, so make some of the rules. What do you do? What's the protocol when we want to do a wire transfer at our company? Okay, wire transfer protocol. We're always going to make a phone call. We're always going to call the bank, and we're always going to call the person that we're wire transferring. I'm never going to accept wire transfer instructions only over email, right? If the bad guy called you up on the phone, you would know pretty quick that it wasn't Sally at the title company. You would know that it's somebody from somewhere else trying to get you to do something different. So like make your policies and procedures to include some human interaction. And like I said earlier, I think the bad guys are playing on the fact that a lot of us are distanced at this time compared to how we used to be. You used to be able to walk down the hallway and talk to the person in accounting face to face. But for many months of last year, I bet you were sitting in maybe different homes or different offices or distributed. And so as we have a more distributed workforce, don't only rely on the email. Second thing, marketing activities, gift card scam. Like I said, we're never gonna do that because it's just an easy scam. So Lucy, I'm never gonna send you an email that says buy gift cards for Straight Edge. That's just not how we're gonna do that. And then also be cautious when you enter your password on a website. The vendors and the companies that we're working with, they're getting better at this, but it's, you might be tempted when you get an email from your bank or you get an email from your credit card company that says, there's something funny on your account. Click this button and go ahead and log in and let's resolve this thing that we see on your account. They're doing that less and less because they know that it's fishy, but just be super wary when you get an email from anything that's like looks automated and is telling you, you need to log into this website. Because like I said, what the bad guys will do is trick you into going to a website and then giving up your username and password. And that could be your bank information username and password, your Office 365 username and password, other email platform you might have, electronic medical records. I mean, these things are becoming more widely known. And so it's a good trick to play on people. In our industry, there are two ticketing systems that a lot of companies use that are in the IT service field. One's called Autotask, one's called ConnectWise. Well, our company uses Autotask, but we've received attempted phishing where they say, your ConnectWise account looks like it might have a problem. And then there's a link to log in. Well, around here we go, well, that's not the ticketing system that we use. That's really bizarre. But what the bad guys know is that, they have a 50-50 chance of getting it right that my company uses ConnectWise. And if they know Doug Miller and they know we're an IT company, they can send us an email and try to trick us into thinking they're one or the other company to try to give up our credentials. Anyway, so we got to be wary about that. These are the things you need to talk about with your team. These are 5-minute conversations you can have during your company meetings or your daily huddles or whatever you might want to do. Just to reiterate, like, there are bad people out there that want to send you fake emails and trick you to do things that you wouldn't ordinarily do. So like I said, be cautious, have those situations. These are 2 emails that I received. One was like 4 months ago, 5 months ago, and then one was now. So I don't know if you guys have seen these people on billboards here in South Texas, but the Bandus law firm. So they called us one time to talk a little bit about maybe becoming a customer. Anyway, we ended up not working with them, so they weren't a customer. But time went by, and I got this email from Chris, who I actually had never talked to. I talked to an office manager. I never actually talked to Chris. Somehow I was on their mailing list. But his email got hacked. So what happened here was at some point in time, the bad guys either guessed his email password or he gave up his email password. So one or the other. They guessed it or they gave it up. They then took all the contacts in his Outlook, like his Office 365 profile. They took all of his contacts and then they sent all of them an email that looked like this. And see how it says, there's an important message from there powered by the Bantas law firm. And then it wanted me to click on that link that says preview the message. Can you see what that link is right there, right? So that link says, synergyscience.org, okay? Nothing to do with their company, and that was a malicious website. There are some tools we have to go check links inside of websites to see if they're good or bad, and that particular link was definitely a malicious website. But that email looked pretty legit, and it had this same little filter. Now, before I show you the second email, I'm gonna tell you something that the bad guys are able to do right now. We were at a cybersecurity conference 2 years ago, and one of the presenters showed us basically think of like Amazon for bad guys. So it was a website where they could go and buy tools to do all of these malicious activities against potential targets. So they literally can buy these email templates. So the bad guys will buy these templates and then go use them against as many people as they can. Because 2 months ago, I got this email. Doesn't it look a lot like the one that I just showed you? So same template, different person. So this is the people that we bought the shades for at our new office. Her email got compromised, and I got this email from her that she didn't send. It was definitely compromised. Same idea though. Hey, so-and-so sent you an encrypted email. Click on this link, and if you would have hovered over that link, it would have taken you to a potentially malicious website. See, you show people what the two things look like, and hopefully you start to get an idea of what you need to be on the lookout for. Like I said, both of those would have asked me to go, it either would have infected my computer when I went to that link, and or when I got to that link, it would have tried to trick me into entering in my username and password to try to like further get to the people in the contacts list. Anyway, so those are two example emails. So like I said, share these things with your team. Let them know what these emails might look like. At the time, I had no reason to receive an email from either one of these people either. That's the other thing. These emails came out of the blue. The other thing I might point out too, do you guys notice something funny about the date? I received this email on February the 8th, and well, no. Well, then at that time it had, but they used like the European date format. It's like that was February the 8th, 21, but they wrote it 08 to anyway. That's like the European date format. Just kind of bizarre. I was like, that doesn't look right? That was even before I received, because that was the subject line, right? 08, 02, 21. Anyway, so just be on the lookout for goofy stuff like that. Most people pick up on the fact that happens. Gosh, this week, I'll tell you another story, because that's what I told you, right? Like if you tell stories, then people will remember. This week, I received an email from a vendor, and they misspelled Christie. They wrote Corpus Christi with a Y on the end. And I was like, that's really ugly. Like, why did they write a Y on the end? This sounds fishy. So I picked up the phone and called them, and I said, hey, are you really trying to send me this email, or is this something sketchy? And they go, oh no, we really sent you that email. We just didn't spell the city name right. Like, okay, great, just making sure. But like I said, one of those little things that triggers like, hey, the date's funny, or hey, the name's wrong, or just something that's a little out of the ordinary. So be observant, be on the lookout for that. Share that stuff with your team. Oh, I will add to this. We used to be able to look at the actual email address, and that used to be different. Sometimes we would get these emails, and it would just say the person's name. The name would be correct, but the email would be gobbledygook. And that's not the world we live in anymore, because they actually can spoof the entirety of the email address based on some of the tools that they use now. So sometimes they would just try to fool us with the name, but the email would be bogus. In this case, in both of these cases, those are those people's legitimate email accounts. First name, last name, and then their domain name. Okay, all right. So like, what's one of the things that we can do? Multi-factor authentication. So this is abbreviated two ways. This is abbreviated MFA, or sometimes you might hear us refer to it as 2FA. The idea here is that there's two factors or two things that are used to log into your email, your accounting application, your bank account, your whatever. So the first factor is just your password, the same thing that you've used your whole life, right? Username and password, we're really familiar with that. The second factor now is something that you have. Some of you guys might have been around long enough to remember they were called RSA tokens, but they were these little keychains that had a revolving set of digits that were on that keychain. That was kind of the first version of two-factor authentication that's out there. They realized that wasn't super scalable, and they also realized that everybody's carrying a mobile phone with them now, and that's a better something to carry around to do the two-factor authentication. Because two-factor authentication is something you know, your password, and something you have, like your phone that carries the 6-digit PIN on it. So if I can marry up the thing you know and something you have to have on your person, I can eliminate a lot of the potential risks of your password getting compromised. So right now, Microsoft and others use basically 3 different ways to do authentication in that second factor. So one is an application that's going to run on your phone. So there's one called Duo. Microsoft has one called Microsoft Authenticator. There's one called Authly. Google has one called Google Authenticator, but it's an app that runs on your phone that's going to be that thing that generates the 6-digit PIN number. The second thing that you might run across is them sending you a text message. How many of you have done this already with bank accounts, where the bank account sends you the 6-digit PIN number over a text message? That's a great way and still pretty secure. There have been some people that have managed to sort of hack their way through text messaging and using that second factor, but it's still way better than not having anything, and that's a much more difficult hack to get in place. The third one, and Microsoft leverages this and a couple of the others, they'll actually call you. So I don't know if you've ever had a situation where a vendor wants to like call you with an automated message to validate your identity, but you can actually have them call a phone number and you pick up the phone and it says press 1 and you press 1, and that's how you authenticate yourself. So those are kind of the 3 methods: an application on your phone, a text message, or some sort of phone call scenario. So those are 3 things that you can use for that second factor. So most of you are already familiar with this. A lot of banks already require it. Microsoft's guidance on passwords has changed. This kind of blew me away. When our team talked about this in like a group context, I kind of didn't believe them at first. And then I went and read it and I was like, sure enough. So what Microsoft has noticed and what they're starting to preach as good password hygiene is not necessarily changing your password on super frequent, but just choosing a really good, complex, well thought out password and keeping it for a long time. What they realized is that people are lazy. And if I make you change your password on some frequency, you're going to go path of least resistance, and you're going to change it from I like the Dodgers 1 to I like the Dodgers 2 to I like the Dodgers 3, da 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 da. They know that we're lazy and they know that we're going to do that. Well, it kind of defeats the purpose of passwords. So Microsoft is changing their guidance and saying if you can implement a 2-factor solution for your applications, then just pick one really good password. Good passwords are long, 10, 12, 14 characters, numbers, letters, same kind of thing. You guys know the drill with complex passwords. So kind of combine the idea of a good complex password that's long, that's kept for a long time, and you're not having to jump back and forth between a couple different password options that you might have. So Microsoft changed their guidance. So MFA lowers your risk. What it helps you do is reduce the chance that your password's going to get compromised. Even if you manage to fall for one of the bad guys trying to get your password, you still have the 2-factor authentication to kind of keep you in check. It's the belt and the suspenders. So you're able to keep, even if you happen to let that password get out. MFA protects your reputation. This actually is the one that makes me the most concerned for some of our customers. Think about a CPA firm, or think about a law office like that Bantus Law. If all of a sudden all of his contact list gets an email from him that's not really from him, lowers reputation, makes people wonder, like, how did I like this? I don't like that I got on this guy's list, or I don't like that this guy was compromised. Some of you may have even received like letters from your medical practice, your family practice, your dentist, your whatever, that said, hey, we leaked some of your data. Those reduce like sort of people's, confidence in your company and maybe how you're taking care of your IT. So there's some risk to reputation being lost. MFA can help you kind of curb that risk. Unfortunately, Office 365 is a target. If you're one of our clients, you've heard us talk about Office 365. We have moved boatloads of people to Office 365. It is a fantastic email platform and way better than the platform that we had before, like having an Exchange server in your office. However, so many people are using it now that the bad guys see it as a target. And so we have to do things to protect ourselves, because now there's a lot of people using 365. There's a great chance that when they see a company they want to target, that company is using 365. So we need to make sure that we're protecting it appropriately. It is a target. MFA is a relatively painless and simple project to pull off. You're going to have to go through some steps up front to make sure that everybody in your company is familiar with getting the message on your phone or getting the separate authentication pop up on your phone and getting used to that process. But once it's set up the first time, it's not something you have to do over and over and over again. It's built into most of the Microsoft licenses. If you did happen to log in from a different part of the country, it might challenge you and want you to do the two-factor authentication, but that's precisely what we want it to do. If you normally log in your computer from Corpus Christi, Texas, and then all of a sudden you show up in Paris, France, it should challenge you and say, we want to make sure that this is really you. And that's one of the things that your MFA tools can do. Make sure that it's really you logging in from wherever you are. But once it's set up, it's painless. And like I said, it's probably already included in most of the plans that you have in place for 365 right now. So multi-factor authentication. Last slide here, Office 365 backups. So like I said, I like to tell stories. I'm going to tell you a couple stories here. So like we said, we love Microsoft Office 365. Don't hear me say that there's anything inherently bad about 365. It's a great platform. But one of the risks in 365 is that Microsoft is a gigantic company and has fantastic lawyers. And in the SLA for Microsoft, they say that they're not liable for data loss. And that should make you just a little bit nervous, because we would be sitting there going, what do you mean they're not responsible for data loss? Well, it basically means that if they have an issue that causes you to lose data, it's not really their fault. And we all agreed to that when we said we would use 365 for email. Now, it's a very robust platform. They've spent billions of dollars developing it, but we know that things can happen in IT, and we want to protect against that. What I'm actually more concerned about is the next bullet point I have up there, which is basically Microsoft permanently deletes email after a certain amount of time that lives in 365. They can't store all your email forever, including your deleted items. So they're going to delete things permanently after a certain amount of time. Second, accidental deletion and or integration issues. So there's a great chance that you might accidentally delete your own email in the course of doing business. That's actually way more likely than Microsoft deleting your email or accidentally losing it. Way more likely that you accidentally delete your own email, or that an employee that's upset and on their way out, that they might do something malicious as they got ready to kind of leave, delete the email, and you not know. So we're really advocating that if email is an important communication tool in your company, an important part of your sort of business ecosystem, that you go through the process of backing up Office 365. We have a tool that does this. It's really inexpensive for what it does, but it makes several backups a day. And I can tell you that I actually used it at Straight Edge on my own email account. And I'll tell you the story real quick. We were evaluating a sales tool to help us manage our email that we send out, kind of like inviting people to this webinar, sending out these things in the webinar. When I made that integration happen, it had a calendar integration. And I thought, that's pretty cool. So I did the calendar integration with this piece of software. And then all of a sudden, every calendar event that I had from that day into the future ended up duplicated in my calendar when I did this integration. I don't know what I clicked on, but I must have clicked the box that said, hey, mess up all of my calendars. But I clicked the box and I did the integration. All of a sudden, I had 2 of everything in my calendar from here on to forever. So like every birthday that I had in my Outlook, every company meeting that's recurring, everything that myself or my EA had put on my calendar, duplicate. It looked pitiful. Within about 15 minutes, I was able to roll back to the most recent backup that we had taken of our 365 platform and restored all of my calendar invite, or my calendar stuff specifically, to how it looked before I messed it up. Saved me a boatload of time. I don't know how long it would have taken to have gone and cleaned that up out into the future, but was able to revert back. So once again, not Microsoft's fault, absolutely my fault, but I was glad that I had the backup that I could roll back. So in our tool, you can literally roll back like calendar, email, contacts, like whatever you might delete. In the sense too, around like employees that might be exiting, it's taking these snapshots over time. So even an exiting employee that goes to decide to like wipe a bunch of stuff in their inbox, you can go back days, weeks, months in the past and look at what that mailbox looked like at that time before anything was done against that mailbox. So anyway, it's a great tool. Talk to our team about it if this is something that concerns you. I don't know that every client needs it, but if it's something around data protection, or if you have some maybe legal requirements, or if you have some particular concern about email and how you back up your email. Like I said, I've had my own experience with needing to restore, and then great tool to have in place to back up those third-party like email applications like Office 365. Great. So that was the last slide that I had. Lucy, does anybody have any questions that come through in the chat? All right. If we'll open up the floor. If anybody has any questions that's connected online or here in person, feel free to ask them. I'm an open book, and I enjoy talking about this stuff, and I want to make sure that everybody kind of gets their questions answered. So
I'll just make a comment.
Sure.
When you talk about the 3 scams, you had all 3.
Yeah.
Including the wire transfer.
Yes.
And the email went to accounts payable, and they acted on it and sent a vendor's payment to Florida.
Right. Yeah. So if you weren't able to hear that, so basically, Brian mentioned that they've had all 3 of those scams happen at their company before, and to various people over various time. But I guess my question would be, if those people had maybe heard about that ahead of time, do you think that they might have acted different?
The Institute of Wiki said
Sure.
they have to go through another department to authenticate that this wire transfer is just, and we actually have them fill out a new electronic file transfer form.
Okay.
There
you go. So it's funny, you end up building like kind of a paper and human process to make sure that a technology process like doesn't fail you, right? Yeah, perfect. Good example. And sure. Wow. Yeah. Not have to pay you bet. Well, great. Well, if there aren't any other questions online, thanks everybody for joining us remotely. Thanks for joining us in person. Like I said, we love doing these things. If you have any questions, email them in, and thanks for everybody's time. Appreciate it.